Look, I'm sorry, but I have to say it. Kurt Cobain is not part of the Mount Rushmore of grunge, especially when it pertains to the bands and the frontman that led the way for each one of them. Sorry, he's just not one of them. What's going on, all my rock music lovers? Welcome back. We got a good one in store for you today. And this one might get a little dicey, but I think we might get a little something out of it. And maybe we can find some level ground where we can all agree on it. Let's get into it right now. The first thing I'm going to say is whether you're a fan of grunge music, the bands, the sound, anything to do with it, the style, the fact is the early 90s when grunge just came out of nowhere and took the world by storm, you cannot deny the significance of what it did for the music industry. So let's think about something for a second. Let's say you go ask somebody, what is grunge? Do you know what it is? Do you know the impact it had? The people that do know something about it, I'm going to say the casual fan, they're going to say, oh yeah, that was Nirvana, that was Pearl Jam, that was Kurt Cobain, Eddie Vedder, Chris Cornell. And yes, they would not be wrong. And all those names, those people, those bands were a huge, huge part of that movement. But there's some things that people don't mention that are just as huge. You know, really, as it pertains to the Pacific Northwest, I've been there a few times. Beautiful part of our country, no doubt. I went up there when I was just out of high school, just because I got a wild hair at my you-know-what. I said, you know what? I've never seen the Space Needle. I've never been to Seattle. My girlfriend at the time, we packed up our truck and we headed northwest. Again, real quick, I'm going to apologize about something. I mentioned the girlfriend part and us going up to Seattle, so my wife will watch this video. So again, that's the past. It means absolutely nothing. Again, let's move on. But a lot of people won't mention Sub Pop Records unless you were in the know, you were a fan, or you're from that area. That independent record label was huge, a huge part of the grunge movement, especially in the early days. And then bands like the Screaming Trees, Mudhoney, huge influences on that movement. And a lot of people don't mention them these days. You know, really, if you want to go back a little further, some of those bands like Mudhoney never would have existed if it wasn't for the band Green River, which formed in 1984 in the Washington, Seattle area. You know, most of those members of that band, after the demise of Green River, went on to form Mudhoney, went on to form Mother Love Bone, which all of those bands are really, really important if you want to go down to where the roots of that grunge movement actually started. You know, to kind of touch on Green River again for a second, there's a 1986 compilation album that came out called Deep Six. It was released with a bunch of Seattle-based bands on it. That is a really key album if you want to talk about roots. I mean, roots of the grunge movement. That is something you need to go listen to. It also had bands like Malfunction, Skin Yard, Soundgarden, and the Melvins on there. All bands that were named when you talk about or ask people that were around in the early 90s, especially people from Sub Pop Records. All those bands were a big part of that movement. You know, as far as the Melvins go, I don't think it can be understated the fact that they were very important and a very big part of that. You know, Kurt Cobain has named them multiple times as a big influence on him. Buzz Osborne came out and said that he don't think that their band is one of the bigger influences on that. In fact, the band Green River comes up a lot. Mother Love Bone and Screaming Trees, Mudhoney, they all get named a lot. But the thing is, nowadays, when people talk about the grunge movement, they don't get named enough. But you got to understand, those were big influences. But you got to realize, too, when those bands were in the early days, and we're talking about roots of the grunge movement, Soundgarden was there, too. And you got to realize, Soundgarden has to be the only band out of that small group that actually punched through the mainstream to make it. And they're part of the Big Four when people talk about it. Now, when I say the Big Four, I think everybody knows what I mean. Obviously, I'm talking about Pearl Jam, Nirvana, Alice in Chains, and Soundgarden. Those are probably the biggest four that come to mind, especially for, again, I'm going to say the casual fan. But those are four of the biggest bands that come out of that movement. Album sales, you know, popularity. Their style was mostly imitated all around the country. But again, it wasn't their style. It was that movement style. And I mean, I can't stress enough. It was like literally somebody just shot a bazooka at you. And the next thing you know, you're wearing flannel and cut off jeans. But, you know, Soundgarden's influence, I think people don't realize. I think that might be the biggest underdog influence that people don't seem to mention enough. Well, another band that I don't think gets mentioned quite enough, but some people don't even label them as grunge. They label them as post-grunge, but if you ask me, they got the sound as far as lead vocals go, and they got the style, and the guys just have that undertone rock type sound where they can belt some high notes, but they can just lull along like a lot of the grunge bands did. You know, it was like, you know the sound. I can't describe that sound, but you know what I'm talking about. Stone Temple Pilots was absolutely a big part of that. But again, they don't get mentioned nearly enough when they're talking about that movement. Just like a lot of them bands that were there when the origins of that movement started. So now as we go around and get back to Kurt Cobain, the fact of the matter is, Nirvana is a good band in my opinion, there's no doubt. And anybody that says otherwise, that just tells me they're not a fan of that style of music. But you really got to understand, Nirvana's early stuff, you know, Kurt's voice is Kurt's voice. You can obviously distinct it from anybody else's. But the fact of the matter is, when Nevermind came out, it took the world by storm. And that just set the whole wheels in motion for that grunge movement. And it was just in. It was in overnight. And I've heard people that are from that area. And they said, no, it's not like people are just saying that and it's blowing smoke up our ass. Literally, it was like it came through overnight and the world just changed. You know, I don't know what I don't know, but I know one thing. People in the music business, those executives, they're smart. And a lot of people say that Nevermind, even though it's Nirvana, you know, Kurt's songwriting skills come through. But the thing is, you know they're smart. They know how to commercialize stuff. And even, it wasn't a big transition from those Nirvana fans that were there before Nevermind and after. They were still fans. They were still representing their band, their guy, Kurt, Chris, and then, you know, their new drummer at the time of the release of Nevermind. You know who I'm talking about. The man himself, Dave Grohl, because he wasn't the original drummer. We all know that now. But the thing was, you can't really tell, but that album, its explosion was definitely helped to, you know, a lot of those executives helped that happen. And the fact of the matter is, if people know what they're doing, they can make stuff happen. And people in the music business, they know how to make shit happen. Let me kind of explain what I'm getting to and what I mean by the album Nevermind. It was released through DGC Records, okay? That is a division of Interscope Records, which is owned by Universal Music Group. Okay, listen. Their album before that, Bleach, was released through Sub Pop Records. And I cannot stress enough the importance of Sub Pop Records to the grunge movement. Huge, and we gotta be thankful for that. But if Nevermind, the entire album, the same songs, everything about that was released through Sub Pop Records, do you think it would have reached the same level of success that it did? You know the answer is no. Again, that don't take away nothing. None of Kurt's songwriting abilities, none of his talent, that takes nothing away. But you know that a huge record label can make things better. They definitely commercialized Nevermind in a subtle way. You may not even realize it because it was such a great album. And to be honest, some of the first songs I heard by Nirvana were from Nevermind. I eventually backtracked and listened to their earlier stuff later, and I enjoy it. It's great because Kurt's talent is just that. It's a great talent. But again, it's amazing what a huge record label can do. Think about Mr. Beast with YouTube. What he can do to a YouTube video. I can't do that, and a lot of people can't. Steven Spielberg, what he can do to a movie. A lot of people can't do what Steven Spielberg does. It's just amazing what the money and the backing from a huge company or label can do and make with an album or a movie or anything. You know that was a big help with the album Nevermind. So now I know you're asking that question. Where do I get off saying Kurt Cobain don't belong on the Mount Rushmore of grunge? Well, to be honest with you, I found it amazing after talking to a lot of people recently and we got into that conversation of grunge music. They said they love the music, but most of them were saying like, you know, I put Alice in Chains above Nirvana, or I put Eddie Vedder above Kurt Cobain. And again, what is all this? It's all opinion. So, do I say Kurt Cobain really doesn't belong on there? If you ask me, no. He definitely does belong on the Mount Rushmore of grunge. But it just depends what you're talking about. Because the origins, those bands that helped get that thing in motion, those guys are underrated to the fullest. But again, Kurt Cobain, he definitely does belong on the Mount Rushmore of grunge. Now, if we actually want to sit down and start saying who belongs on that Mount Rushmore, that could be a debate that could probably go on for hours. I'll be honest with you. My favorite band out of that movement has got to be Alice in Chains. I love Alice in Chains. No doubt. I think, again, I've said it before, their album Dirt can go toe-to-toe with Nevermind. But again, they were both produced by big record companies. And I think we got to give a lot of thanks to those companies because that made them albums what they were. No doubt the talent had to be there, which it was. But again, you know those record labels helped make it what they were. So again, as far as influence and impact on the world, Kurt Cobain is one of the biggest influences because thanks to that album Nevermind and the explosion that it caused, that puts Kurt up there. Now again, as far as talent, there's too much talent that came out of the Seattle grunge movement to sit there and say that 4 guys made that Mount Rushmore and had the biggest impact. Because there's too many people that came from that time that were a big influence on that movement. So again, Kurt Cobain not being part of the Mount Rushmore of grunge is obviously opinion. And to my surprise, again, there are a lot of people that would not put him up there. But again, hey, it's all opinion. It depends what you're basing that Mount Rushmore on. You know, is it influence? Is it origins? Is it album sales? Is it popularity? Whatever the case is, whatever you're basing it on, you can put whoever you want up there. But again, there's a lot of people that do belong, and there's a lot of people that made big impact on that movement. And again, it was a huge movement that will forever be stamped in music history. But again, thank you everybody for watching. I had a blast making this video. Again, go out there, take care of your family, take care of your friends, have fun, go for your dreams, do something with your life that you want to, that makes you happy. And until next time, I'm out.